This is part 3 of Esther. We're going to turn to the book of Esther again. We did chapters 1 through 3 the first time, second time 4 through 6, and now we're going to do 7 through 10. And 10 is a little short chapter, so it shouldn't take very long. But this Sunday's Resurrection Day, when we celebrate Christ, and He gave His life for us, but He rose again. And Esther did as she was instructed and risked giving her life to save the Israelites from destruction. So, or the Jews, I should say. Anyway, we're going to start in chapter 7. Up until this time, the conspiracy to kill the king took place, and we had the queen who wouldn't honor her husband and come before him when he asked her to, so she was dethroned. Vashti, and I am not 100% sure. Like the version I have, the Amplified, kind of gives you the impression that she was put in with the concubines. She was dethroned, so she had no. Well, I don't know. I guess I don't know. I mean, it's like all the girls that came before the king to try to be queen that didn't make it. It's wherever they got put. But they weren't. They were still a part of his harem. Basically harem. Yeah. Anyway, that was the impression I got, but the Bible doesn't specifically state that. So, at least wise, the Amplified doesn't specifically state that. So I'm not 100% sure. But anyway, then he sought for, would you call them contestants for the new queen? And kind of a beauty contest anyway, and kings could do all kinds of crazy things, I don't know. I just know that if you got picked to be one of the contestants, you had no way out. And so anyway, Esther ended up in this group of women, and they had to prepare themselves for a year before they could go before the king. And they took beauty treatments and lessons.
Your mic isn't.
That's what it is. It's unplugged. It's got issues, and if I'm not careful, I contribute to those issues by pulling on the cord. We are going to start in 7. I'm just doing a little summary overall thing, and I may not include everything, but anyway, through it all, Esther ends up getting picked as the new queen. But she was told by her uncle who raised her to not say that to not tell anybody voluntarily that she's a Jew. And he had a reason for that. God, I guess, had inspired. Huh? I think God instructed him how to handle it. I really do. I believe it. It doesn't really say that specifically, but God was right. And you might speak into your mic, because on the tape it comes out nothing. They don't know what you're saying, so they don't understand what I mean. why I'm responding like I am. But anyway, so she ended up getting chosen. And before this, Mordecai had been instrumental in informing Esther so she could inform the king, or the king's, anyway, inform them that there was a conspiracy against the king's life. And so the conspirators were dealt with. And anyway, Esther became the queen, and then Haman came in on the scene, so to speak, and he did not like the Jews because Mordecai sat at the beginning of the gate and would not bow to him. There was a decree out that was made that involved Haman giving honor. Huh? He was given, he was like the right-hand man, is the way I understood it. How did you understand it, Dave? No, yeah, he's in there somewhere, that's true. But anyway, he had a lot of, he had some authority from the king. And, well, in chapter 3, it said King Ahasuerus promoted Haman, the son, anyway, he promoted him and advanced him and established his authority over all the officials who were with him. So he was given authority in the royal service. Anyway, when that happened, all of the king's servants who were at the king's gate or in royal service of some kind bowed down and honored and paid homage to Haman, except for Mordecai. And with him being a Jew, he wouldn't do it because God's the only one that deserves that kind of honor and homage. So he wouldn't do it. And anyway, he got mad. Pardon? It doesn't say. So I don't know. But if he didn't, the king didn't worry about it. I just know that Haman was the one that was concerned about not being shown honor by Mordecai. And so he was upset about that, and he set out to try to figure out a way to get rid of Mordecai and the Jews, because the Jews all had the same thing, the same attitude. We're not bound down before any man. We bow down before God. And I don't know, perhaps, I didn't really look into it, but perhaps King Ahasuerus maybe had understood, and permitted them having a different belief because of them being Jews. I don't know.
It says Haman is like a prime minister or a visor.
Okay. And when you speak, you need to speak louder, because your voice is soft anyway.
Oh, so soft.
A gentle man. He's a gentleman, Dave is.
So it says he's from the Amalekites, who are enemies of the Jews.
Haman was, yeah.
And so, yeah, he was next to the king.
And he was next to the king, and he did not like Jews. So he came up with a plan and talked the king into going along with it, if I understood it correctly, that on a certain day, Mordecai and all the Jews would be destroyed or killed. And anyway, later on, Mordecai gets that information to Esther and says, you've got to go meet before the king and plead for the lives of all the Jews, which will include you, by the way. And so whether you go before the king or not, you're going to run the risk of being killed, because if you went before the king and he hadn't called you, you could be killed. Or if you came before him and he didn't lift the what is it, golden scepter up to them, saying it's okay for them to come in and approach him. I mean, you had to get permission to approach him, or you got killed. So anyway, Queen Esther asked Mordecai to ask all the Jews to pray and fast for favor with the king, and she and her maids did the same thing. And then when they had finished praying and fasting, then she went before the king, and he held out the gold scepter that she could come, because he hadn't called her. And so he didn't kill her that time. And he really, really liked her a lot. So he showed her favor, and he told her she could have whatever she asked for, up to half of the kingdom. And so he must have been what? Smitten. Yeah. He really liked her. He liked her a lot.
You know those younger ones.
But anyway, so she prepared and invited him and Haman, because Haman had already built gallows to hang Mordecai on, and then he was going to have all the Jews killed. But that was his plans for Mordecai, and so. It's amazing. So anyway, they were invited. Haman and the king were invited to a banquet hosted by Esther, and at the banquet, she announced she was going to have another banquet the next day, and that they were both invited to that. And then she would declare what her request was. And so, let's see, I believe that's where we are now. Right. So Esther 6:14, verse 14 says, while they were still speaking with him, he was talking to some of the guys. He was telling that he had been invited again. I believe that's where this is. Yeah. Anyway, so when he found out he was invited to a second banquet with the queen, he got really puffed up, and he was already a very puffed up man in his pride. And he started telling his wife and all of his counselors and everybody that, he was really somebody special, because he was being called to another banquet. Oh, and I forgot, right before that, it was the king was noticed that Mordecai had never been rewarded for having saved his life from those two conspirating men before, and so he had asked Haman to give him an idea of what he could do to honor the man. He didn't say it was Mordecai, but the man who had that he had failed to give honor to, that he wanted to give honor to. And Haman has said, well, for the man whom the king desires to honor, let a royal robe be brought, which the king has worn, which was supposed to be more special than just any robe, and the horse on which the king had ridden, and on whose head a royal crown has been placed. And anyway, so that he would be able to wear the royal garments and take them out, be led out by important people to the king across the city, and stated, this is what's going to be done. This is what I'm going to do for, let's see, this is what shall be done for the man whom the king desires to honor. That's how the words went. And so when he found that out, he was at first excited till he found out that Mordecai was the one that was going to be honored instead of himself. And so that kind of burst his bubble. But anyway, so he went home and told his wife everything that had happened, and his fellow friends and counselors. And his wife said to him, if Mordecai, before whom you have begun to fall in status, is of Jewish heritage, you will not overcome him, but will certainly fall before him. Because she already knew his plans against the Jews, but if the king has shown him honor, has shown Mordecai honor, she knew that was going to be a strike against Haman. So she kind of was used as a prophet to let him know this was not good. Okay, we're ready for chapter 7, and we got 7, 8, and 9. So can I get you, Joseph? Well, let's see. No, I've been going by alphabet. Dave, can I get you to read chapter 7, and then I'll have Josie read chapter 8, and I'll read chapter 9, and we'll do 10 after all that.
Chapter 7, verse 1. So the king and Haman came to the banquet with Esther the queen. And the king said again unto Esther on the second day at the banquet of wine, what is thy petition, Queen Esther? And it shall be granted unto thee. And what is thy request? And it shall be performed, even to the half of the kingdom. Then Esther the queen answered and said, if I have found favor in thy sight, O king, if it please the king, let my life be given me at my petition, and my people at my request. For we are sold, I and my people, to be destroyed, to be slain, and to perish. But if we had been sold for bondmen and bondwoman, I had held my tongue, although the enemy could not countervail the king's damage. Then the king Ahasuerus answered and said unto Esther the queen, who is he? Where is he? That durst presume in his heart to do so. And Esther said, the adversary and enemy is this wicked Haman. Then Haman was afraid before the king and the queen. And the king, arising from the banquet of wine in his wrath, went into the palace garden. And Haman stood up to make request for his life to Esther the queen, for he saw that there was evil determined against him by the king. Then the king returned out of the palace garden into the place of the banquet of wine, and Haman was fallen upon the bed wherein Esther was. Then said the king, will he force the queen also before me in the house? As the word went out of the king's mouth, they covered Haman's face. And Harbona, one of the chamberlains, said before the king, behold also the gallows 50 cubits high, which Haman had made for Mordecai, he had spoken good for the king, standeth in the house of Haman. Then the king said, Hang him therein. So they hanged Haman on the gallows that he had prepared for Mordecai. Then was the king's wrath pacified.
Okay. Any comments on what's been read so far in chapter 7?
Yeah, what you do unto others, the same will be done unto you.
So you better do good to them if you don't want bad to happen to you. Yeah, and I just I think of Esther. You know, the king let her know that she could ask for anything up to half of the kingdom. Well, in more than one way, she let him know she didn't have dollar signs in her eyes, because she was pleading for the lives of herself and her fellow Jews. And she could have asked for the lives of her fellow Jews and herself and up to half of the kingdom. And she didn't even mention half of the kingdom there. And she also mentioned that if they were just being sold as slaves, she wouldn't have bothered the king. So she showed him great honor by saying this was an important matter she brought to him, not something that they couldn't live with. Well, they couldn't live at all if they were being slain. So I just found that to be rather interesting, that she did what she should do. She did what was right in the eyes of God, as a matter of fact. And so I thought that was great. And the king, when he came back, even though he misjudged Haman as to why Haman was falling on the couch where Esther was, he was thinking he was thinking Haman was trying to assault the queen, when he was trying to get her to have mercy on him. But he wasn't going to show mercy to the Jews, so he didn't get mercy. There's the do unto others as you'd have them do unto you, and he didn't do to the Jews what he would have done to himself. So anyway.
And today we have a king, and we're being surrounded by the enemy right now. We've been invaded from within, and today we need to make a petition to the King, King Jesus. So we're in the same boat. We're in the same situation right now, and because if we don't get on the same page and in our lives and seek God, we're going to be slaves going to the slaughter. Eventually we all will be eliminated, and that's the plan of man. But God has a plan too. But we need to ask Him for, His will in our lives.
Amen. All right. Let's go on ahead, if you would, please, Josie, chapter 8. I can't hear you.
Oh. I know. On that same day, King Ahasuerus gave the estate of Haman, the Jews' enemy, to Queen Esther. Then Mordecai was brought before the king, for Esther had told the king that he was her cousin and foster father. The king took off his ring, which he had taken back from Haman, and gave it to Mordecai, appointing him prime minister, and Esther appointed Mordecai to be in charge of Haman's estate. And now once more Esther came before the king, falling down at his feet and begging him with tears to stop Haman's plot against the Jews. And again the king held out the golden scepter to Esther. So she rose and stood before him and said, "If it please your majesty, and if you love me, send out a decree reversing Haman's order to destroy the Jews throughout the king's province. For how can I endure it, to see my people butchered and destroyed?" Then King Ahasuerus said to Queen Esther and Mordecai the Jew, "I have given Esther the palace of Haman, and he has been hanged upon the gallows because he tried to destroy you. Now go ahead and send a message to the Jews, telling them whatever you want to in the king's name, and seal it with the king's ring, so that it can never be reversed." Immediately the king's secretaries were called in. It was now the 23rd day of the month of July, and they wrote as Mordecai dictated a decree to the Jews and to the officials, governors, and princes of all the provinces, from India to Ethiopia, 127 in all. The decree was translated into the languages and dialects of all the people of the kingdom. Mordecai wrote in the name of the king Ahasuerus and sealed the message with the king's ring, and sent the letters by swift carriers, riders on camels, mules, and young dromedaries used in the king's service. This decree gave the Jews everywhere permission to unite in the defense of their lives and their families, to destroy all the forces opposed to them, and to take their property. The day chosen for this throughout all the provinces of King Ahasuerus was the 28th day of February. It further stated that a copy of this decree, which must be recognized everywhere as law, must be broadcast to all the people, so that the Jews would be ready and prepared to overcome their enemies. So the mail went out swiftly, carried by the king's carriers, and speeded by the king's commandment. The same decree was also issued as Shushan Palace. Then Mordecai put on the royal robes of blue and white, and a great crown of gold, with the outer cloak of fine linen and purple, and went out from the presence of the king throughout the city streets filled with shouting people. And the Jews had joy and gladness, and were honored everywhere. And in every city and province, as the king's decree arrived, the Jews were filled with joy, and had the great celebration, and it declared a holiday. And many of the people of the land pretended to be Jews, for they feared what the Jews might do to them.
Okay. Any comments?
Yeah, you see how the tables are turned?
Yes.
You go out today and you try to do right or whatever and say the right thing. Oh, nope. You're going to have people come against you left and right. And in that chapter, it's reversed. They're pretending to be Jews. We better go along with what's going, or else we're going to be whatever.
It's amazing how, God's an on-time God, and things can look pretty bad, and then all of a sudden God changes something, and it goes the other direction from what it looks like, but it's a good direction.
I mean, you can go out. It's not everywhere, but you can find stuff in the news where where someone is defending themselves against corruption or attack of some kind, and you will be arrested for defending yourself. It's better that you would just let yourself be murdered or whatever. You're fine, dead. But try to defend yourself. No, you can't do that. That's how messed up it is right here.
Yeah. But it's going to change to God's way real soon. Okay, chapter 9. Now in the 12th month, that is the month of Adar, on the 13th day, when the king's command and edict was about to be executed, on the very day when the enemies of the Jews had hoped to gain power over them and slaughter them, it happened the other way around, so that the Jews themselves gained power over those who hated them. The Jews assembled in their cities throughout the provinces of King Ahasuerus to apprehend those who wanted to do them harm, and no one could stand before them, for the fear of them and their God had fallen on all the peoples. Even all the officials of the provinces and the chief rulers and the governors and those who attended to the king's business supported the Jews in defeating their enemies, because the fear of Mordecai and of his God's power had fallen on them. For Mordecai was great and respected in the king's palace, and his fame spread throughout all the provinces. For the man Mordecai became greater and greater. So the Jews struck all their enemies with the sword, killing and destroying them, and they did what they pleased to those who hated them. At the citadel in Susa, the Jews killed and destroyed 500 men. And they killed Parshandatha, Dalphon, Aspatha, Poratha, Adalia, Eridatha, Parmashta, Arisai, Eridai, Valsetha, the 10 sons of Haman, the son of Hammedatha. I know I didn't pronounce any of those correctly, but that's the best I can do. The 10 sons of Haman, the Jews' enemy, but they did not lay their hands on the plunder. So they were given permission to take the plunder, what the good stuff that the people had. They were given permission to do that, but they didn't. They just destroyed the enemy, and that was it. So see, they weren't greedy. They just wanted what was right for them. The king said to Queen Esther, "The Jews have killed and destroyed 500 men and 10 sons of Haman at the citadel in Susa. What then have they done in the rest of the king's provinces? Now what is your petition? It shall be granted to you. What is your further request? It shall be done." Esther replied, "If it pleases the king, let it be granted to the Jews who are in Susa to act tomorrow also in accordance with the decree of today, and let the dead bodies of Haman's 10 sons be hanged on the gallows out in public so all could see, for an example." So the king commanded it to be done. The decree was given in Susa, and they hanged the bodies of Haman's 10 sons. The Jews who were in Susa also gathered together on the 14th day of the month of Adar and killed 300 men in Susa, but they did not lay their hands on the plunder. Now the rest of the Jews who were in the king's provinces assembled to defend their lives and rid themselves of the enemies, and killed 75,000 of those who hated them, but they did not lay their hands on the plunder. This was done on the 13th day of the month of Adar, and on the 14th day they rested and made it a day of feasting. But the Jews who were in Susa assembled on the 13th and on the 14th of the same month, and on the 15th day they rested and made it a day of feasting and rejoicing. Therefore the Jews of the villages who lived in the rural or unwalled towns make the 14th day of the month of Adar a holiday for rejoicing and feasting and sending choice portions of food to one another. Now Mordecai recorded these events, and he sent letters to all the Jews who lived in all the provinces of King Ahasuerus, both near and far, obliging them to celebrate the 14th day of the month of Adar and the 15th day of the same month annually, because on those days the Jews rid themselves of their enemies. And as the month which was turned for them from grief to joy and from mourning into a holiday, that they should make them days of feasting and rejoicing and sending choice portions of food to one another and gifts to the poor. And it makes me think of the songs that were written that have to do with God has turned my mourning into dancing for me. There's a good example there. So the Jews undertook what they had started to do and what Mordecai had written to them. For Haman the son of Hammedatha and the Agagite, the enemy of all the Jews, had plotted against the Jews to destroy them and cast pur, that is, the lot, to find the right time to disturb and destroy them. But when it came before the king, he commanded in writing that Haman's wicked scheme, which he had devised against the Jews, was to return on his own head, and that he and his sons would endure what he had planned for the Jews and be hanged on the gallows. Therefore they called these days Purim, after the name Pur, meaning lot. And because of all the instructions in this letter and what they had faced in this regard and what had happened to them, the Jews established and made a custom for themselves and for their descendants and for all who joined them, so that they would not fail to celebrate these 2 days as it was written and at the appointed time annually. So these days were to be remembered and celebrated throughout every generation, every family, every province, and every city. And these days of Purim were not to cease from among the Jews, nor their memory fade from their descendants. Then Queen Esther, the daughter of Abihail, with Mordecai the Jew, wrote with full power and authority to confirm this second letter about Purim. He sent letters to all the Jews, to the 127 provinces of the kingdom of Ahasuerus, in words of peace and truth, to establish these days of Purim to be observed at their appointed times, just as Mordecai the Jew and Queen Esther had established for them, and as they had established for themselves and for their descendants with instructions regarding their times of fasting and their lamentations, which are expressions of needing help. The command of Esther established these customs for Purim, and it was written in the book of the royal archives. And chapter 10 is real short. I'll go ahead and read it. King Ahasuerus imposed a tax on the land and on the coastlands of the sea, and all the accomplishments of his authority and strength, and the full account of the greatness of Mordecai to which the king had raised him. Are they not written in the book of Chronicles of the kings of Media and Persia? For Mordecai the Jew was second only to King Ahasuerus, and great among the Jews in favor with his many fellow people, for he worked for the good of his people and spoke for the welfare and peace of the whole nation. Any comments?
No. Boomerang, yeah. What was meant for bad turned out to be they're good.
Yep. There's a little place in my Bible that says PowerPoint says, while Mordecai did receive honor and position at the end of the story, he first had to be willing to sacrifice everything to save his people. Same with Esther. He never sought a position for himself, but simply lived his life in obedience to God's purposes. Take your position as Mordecai did. Don't give up. Stand still, trust God, and see the salvation he has planned for you. So when we stand up for right, and that even trickled down to the Jews, because they were allowed by the king to keep the plunder after they killed the enemy. And my understanding of plunder is the stuff that the enemy owned. They were allowed to take that for themselves, and they didn't. They weren't trying to achieve more stuff. They didn't have what I call dollar signs in their eyes. And I believe that's another reason. It's like the reasons why they were needing to defend themselves wasn't to try to have more possessions. It was to save lives of their people that were being threatened for no good reason, and so unjustly. So I just, God will show honor when we do things with the right motives, and we do the right things, and in the right way. And
as I see it, that one branch of people that was Haman, all of his followers was for destruction, and I guess in a way they were afraid that the Jews might take over, and they wanted to get rid of them, so that their plot and scheme, it's like they were working against the king, because the king didn't know anything about it. If he had, I don't think maybe he wouldn't have went along with it. It didn't sound like he would have. But he didn't know anything about what Haman was doing behind his back. So Esther brought that out, the way she went in, or was God that used Esther and Mordecai to bring that reality out to the king. And he did what was right with his scepter and his influence, his position that he had. So he did things right.
that's true. And by a couple of different verses that between all of us we read, it was my understanding that some of the people who thought they were for Haman's way of doing things, they switched over to the Jews,
Yeah.
because, and I don't know as they did it for the right reason, because their reasoning was
Fear. Fear.
but
Fearing.
fear of the Jews and their God. But they chose to switch over rather than to keep standing behind Haman
they made
and
the
get
right
killed.
decision.
Yeah, they made the right decision. So, and I just,
Whether they wanted to or not, they had to make a right decision on that.
right. There you go. So, Dave, you got any more to say about that?
No.
We covered it, didn't we?
All right. Well, we thank you, God, for this, what you put in scriptures to help us understand the right ways and the wrong ways of your, and how you think about things, and how you deal with people and so forth. And we just thank you for disclosing that in your scriptures and your word, and help us, Lord, to keep in contact with you at all times, so that we may at all times know thy will, which is the best will, the best way to go, and help us to have the courage and whatever else we need to do that which is according to your will, plan, and purpose for each and every one of us. We thank you for this day, and we thank you for this Bible study, and I hope everybody got something out of it. I feel like there's a lot more to it than what we brought out, but that's the best I can figure right now. So I thank you for what understanding I have, and I pray that you will increase our understanding even more as we read more scriptures in the future. And we just thank you for it in Jesus' name. Amen.
Amen.